Good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana, 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I am here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Yep. Views expressed are those of the speakers, and you'll find out who they are in a moment, but not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or, as we like to say on the TV version of this show, UPTV. Whose views are these? Well, you're about to find out. I have with me two guests who will hopefully introduce themselves right now.
My name is Miriam Keep, and I'm a master's student in the urban planning program at the University of Illinois. I'm taking the local policy and immigration course along with
Rachel Wilson, also a second-year master's student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
Having the same problem I had last time, that there's no volume to that mic. Can you bonk on it or something? Yeah, it works.
Huh.
Okay, that's weird.
Should I just speak louder?
No, it's almost like you have to wake it up or something, because we were talking into it for a while and nothing happened, and then I hit it, and then it worked after that. So try it again.
Sure. Well,
okay.
I'm Rachel Wilson. I'm also a second-year master's student at the University of Illinois, and I'm in Stacy Harwood's local policy and immigration class along with Miriam.
Greetings and welcome.
Thank you
for coming. It is so cool that you guys come. I'm sure you're not doing it of your own volition. It's not like you're like, oh, I just wish I could go on the radio. Is this she like twist your arm or something? How does she make this happen?
It's part of the class, but I think it's really great because I wouldn't have known that it exists. Unless we had been asked to come on the radio station. So now, maybe I'll reconsider my radio career.
Yeah, I think you were telling me you'd been on the radio before, so you've got your radio skills.
Oh yeah.
Do you have a radio voice?
My radio voice?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
like
it's
this.
sort of
Hey.
just like pretty calm and slow and just.
This is FM after all.
Okay.
So
yeah.
you
The later the
can
night
you do
gets,
that? Just talk
the
like
lower
this.
the voice.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can try.
Yeah, think people sleeping and relaxing and FM. This is FM. Yeah. Now if it's AM, we're talking like this. Hey, welcome. We have to talk really fast, but we're not on AM.
I'm feeling very FM right now.
Oh yes.
Oh,
That's
yes.
good. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Me too.
Yeah, it's something about the fact that there's like no air conditioning in this room. I'm sure you've probably noticed that. That's why I had the door open earlier. It's like it will get hotter and less oxygenated as the time goes by.
Great.
Good to know.
It's good to know, yeah. Usually it's either really cold in here or really hot. Those are the two choices. There's like nothing in between. So all winter long, you're sweating, and all summer long, you're freezing in here.
Good to know.
Yeah. So on that note, I hope you'll come back again sometime and join me
yeah.
for this wonderful show, because it's so much fun. So anyway, you're both in the same class, right?
Yes.
And what is the name of the class again?
Local policy and immigration.
Local policy and immigration, which means local policy as it relates to immigration, or local policy is one thing and immigration is something else, or how does it work?
As it relates, we've been doing a lot of readings about different towns across the U.S. and then also Canada and some other European countries about how they address the issue of more people moving in from other countries, and at least in the United States context, it's sort of immigration policy has become sort of localized, decentralized from there's the national policy, and then towns and cities are sort of making their own sort of policies and laws aimed at either we're learning a lot about the different tactics of towns that are sort of more welcoming to immigrants, and then there's other towns that are implementing policies that are very destructive. So things like proving you're a citizen or that you're a U.S. citizen in order to get housing or in order to get a job, and that can be contrasted with more like affirmative policies that we've been talking about in the class. So yeah.
Do you think? How can I put this? Not that it exists in a vacuum, but do you think that the national conversation about immigration has a big effect on local policy, or is it more the local experience? Because I know some towns, like border towns or places where like lots of immigrants have come in all at once, they are grappling with like, what do we do with all these people? You know, how do we deal with that? And but other places seem to be equally fired up about it without having any real problem or even much contact at all with immigrants. So it's like, I wonder, and I don't know if there's even a way of knowing, but if there's how you can tell like just how much of it is the national manipulation of the message about immigrants and how much of it's like we have this problem here that we have to like figure out what to do with.
Well,
anyway, I mean, we're looking back and forth. Like, I'm not asking anyone in particular.
No. I think one thing that has become a major theme within the class is that the national conversation, of course, is important in shaping the conversation, and especially in terms of how different people in different communities are framing their arguments surrounding immigration. But at the same time, different communities within the U.S. are implementing policy regarding immigration in vastly different ways. And a major theme that keeps coming up within the class is just that the experiences of immigrants within the United States or within Canada or some of the other countries that we looked at vary a lot depending on which city or which town they're living in. And so a lot of these experiences depend on the kinds of local conversations that are happening much more so than conversations happening at the national level.
And I think that Champaign-Urbana could be held up as a really good example of that. So how in 2012 the Immigration Forum convinced the sheriff to pull out of secure communities. I think that that's been a theme in other cities that we've read about as well, where these local municipalities are getting fed up with, feeling like they need to work with ICE to identify undocumented immigrants, and they're seeing the benefits of immigrants to their communities. So instead of directly working with ICE, there's been communities, and Cook County, I think, as well, has done this, where they've just pulled out of working with the secure communities, and now local law enforcement isn't responsible for letting ICE know if they detain someone who happens to be undocumented. So I think that's just one example of how these local communities can sort of make their own choices with the influence of like very vigilant groups like the Immigration Forum.
But of course.
Right.
Thank you for that plug. Oh, now your mic's off again.
Oh no! Should I
there it is.
tap it again?
No, it works out.
Okay.
It might be the cord. I wonder.
Weird. I'm
I don't know.
pressing it in as much as I can.
I'm wearing these headphones, so
Can you hear me now?
I can hear it like when it goes away and comes back, and it went away for a second. Anyway, it's
okay.
you're fine. No, I was just actually I was just thinking. I don't know. I think it was early 2000s. I remember reading a lot about how Las Vegas was one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S. Do you remember that? Like just news stories like, oh, they're growing leaps and bounds. They can hardly keep up with all the people coming there. And they characterized it as this really great thing. Like, isn't it cool that we're growing and we're, blah, blah, blah. And yet you have these other communities where immigrants are coming there, and they characterize it as this big problem. It's like, oh, gosh, we've got all these immigrants coming in. We don't know what to do. And it just seems weird that, like, there's these two completely different concepts of what is pretty much the same thing. People coming here, looking for work, wanting to live there. People coming here, looking for work, wanting to live there. The only difference is one group is criminalized and the other is not. And that seems to be, to my mind, the only difference between the two. Because it's not like all these stories about Las Vegas were saying, yeah, lots of rich people are wanting to come here and build their castles. It wasn't anything like that. It was like people looking for work. They heard that there were jobs on the Strip, and so they came there. And it just strikes me that immigration policy creates a lot of the problems that it then seems to be called upon to solve. If you just, for example, And of course, people would freak out if I actually recommended this. But if we just opened our border and said, we have no immigration policy, anybody can come here. And you're all equal. You're all just automatically assumed. If you're here, you're a citizen. I don't see how there would be some problems. There'd be a lot of people in some places. They would get as far as the first city they got to, which had happened in the 1800s. New York, they all came over from Europe, and that's as far as they got, pretty much. So New York was like expanding rapidly. That was kind of a problem. But it was a problem they figured out how to deal with, because they weren't looking at it like a plague. They were looking at it like, well, this is just, everybody loves New York, and we'll just do it. So it just seems to me that by creating this sense of like, oh, we can only have so many people coming, and only people from this place and not that place, and all these things, by, setting up these weird artificial barriers, you then create problems when people don't respect those barriers. I mean, if they did, if everybody said, oh, well, it's against the law, I can't go, well, that would be one thing. But because they don't do that, and you already know they're not going to do that, so it's not like creating the law, you are doing anything other than making a statement. That's all laws are, I guess, right? They're just statements. They're not, laws don't stop you from doing things. They just provide you with a possible punishment for doing it if you get caught.
True.
And hopefully make you think, maybe I shouldn't do that. Anyway, I'm rambling. No, we were talking about this before the show, about how
the sort of situations that look like trade policies, national trade policies, and the large demand for the sort of labor that a lot of immigrants come to the United States to do. It doesn't, I think one of us said, like, it doesn't add up, the equation doesn't add up if there's all this demand for this labor, and there's no path to citizenship for low-skilled workers who are coming to the U.S. to find this kind of work. And like you said, they just sort of want to, they have goals of improving their lives. So how can that be something that's criminalized? And I mean, there's this video called, I think it's Between the Bottomlands and the something. I wish I could remember what it was called, but it's about Beardstown, Illinois.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually where my grandfather is from. And so he has told me about this narrative a little bit, but it's sort of was sort of maybe a dying town, and then a lot of immigrants came to work at a meatpacking plant and sort of work to revitalize the town, and but there were still the issues of the company that they worked for, the meatpacking plant, what had power over these workers, because if they unionized or anything, that could be the company could threaten to call ICE or some. So they had this power over them, and the video also showed that there were actually advertisements in Mexico about this certain meatpacking plant, as saying, "Come to Beardstown, Illinois. There are many jobs here." So, when you see that sort of advertisement, people are just, of course, going to be drawn to go there. And then without the path to citizenship, it's just like that's the equation that just doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's interesting. In a country that prides itself on free market capitalism, this whole concept of the free market, you take away regulations and the market will decide the value of this or of that or whatever. Well, supposedly, the market decides the value of labor. And if you have couple of people who were born in Indiana who want a job in Indiana and they would like to get $15 an hour to do it, and you have a couple of people born in Mexico who want a job in Indiana and they're willing to take $7.50 an hour, the free market is going to go towards the people from Mexico. It's not like they're stealing jobs. They're just offering a service at a lower price, which is supposedly what free market is all about. It's like they're being competitive. Yet people look at that somehow as stealing jobs or taking away jobs that, it's this weird. It's just such a strange way of thinking.
No,
You're nodding. You're
this
like,
point is so interesting to me. Well, because I come from a family of libertarians, and
Okay.
so I mean, I guess to me this is a contradiction that I do have a hard time understanding, because it's like you said, if we want to have a free market, part of that is like labor would also have to be free, and that would be part of how like this supposedly natural system would
Right.
correct itself. So I think there's definitely a contradiction there, and because these borders are not natural, they're implemented and
Yeah.
enforced.
Yeah, so it's so strange. It's like who? Well, I know who benefits. That's
Yes.
that's the weird thing. Is like you can ask these questions. It's like, well, I already know that. But I guess for the sake of the listener who may not know this stuff, it's probably good for us to ask and then answer these questions ourselves. So we know that there is a certain class. Class is maybe not the right word. What would you call it? Strata of society? I mean, it's sort of like a rentier class, I suppose is one way to put it. People who make their money by charging other people money for stuff, for services, for space, for everything that you need. Somebody's out there is willing to come up with a way of charging you money for it, whether they ought to or not. So that it's a certain group, but this is sort of different. I don't know, it's like the business community, I guess, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. For some reason, they seem to always escape blame for everything, except with the bearded socialists who are like, the Bernie Sanders, no, the 1%. But I mean, there's somehow in the equation you get the people who want jobs fighting against the other people who want jobs for those jobs, and nobody ever seems to notice who provides the jobs or who's creating those jobs. And then in one easy step, we're back to, well, it's capitalism. If you got rid of capitalism, then we wouldn't have this problem in the first place. So in a simple step, I've become an anarchist, I guess.
Well, I think, that totally manifests with the election that's going on. I think that we're going to bring this up.
There he is, right
just
there.
sort of the use of undocumented immigrants as a scapegoat for not for high rates of unemployment and people not having as many job opportunities as they may have perceived that there used to be in the past. But then you look at the decisions that were made by politicians influenced by business, that led to deindustrialization and the breaking down of unions. So it's sort of these structural things that have led to a lot of the sort of lack of good paying jobs that it's not as easy for people to grasp, I think, than someone can just come in and say, like, point your finger at these people, these immigrants. They're the reason why everything is so hard for you right now. Which
well, and to be fair, there's more at work here. It's not just jobs and it's not just money, which was, as I remember, that was my critique of Sanders when he was running. It was just like he turned everything into a financial argument, which is like, okay, that's important, but there's more going on here. There are people whose sense of ownership of society, of culture, of space is being challenged, and they don't like that. They're uncomfortable with that. So if it were pitting this group who likes NASCAR and cowboy hats and chocolate sodas against this group who likes NASCAR and wears cowboy hats and chocolate sodas, that would be a different argument. And it wouldn't be, it might still be a big argument, but it would not be the same argument as these people who look completely different, speak differently, have a different culture, are coming here. Whoa, that's, you're challenging me in lots of different ways that make me uncomfortable. You're unsettling my sense of what the system is, what right is, what normal is. So it's a lot easier. It's not just about money. It's about a lot of different things. And that makes it more complicated, I think, and harder to explain maybe to people who don't understand or haven't really thought deeply about it. Because even if they kind of agree with you on the money side, and they go, well, yeah, it kind of makes sense, but still there's this like, I don't know, there's this thing that they can't quite embrace comfortably
Yeah.
that they don't know how to articulate because they haven't thought about it necessarily.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, in one of our readings for the class, it compared two cities in Pennsylvania, and one of them had a history of welcoming immigrants since the 60s, and had a lot of good policies in place to make sure that immigrants were being able to access the resources they needed. And the other town didn't really have a history of immigration at all, or as much as the other town. And so when a lot of immigrants started to come to that town, they had a lot harder time sort of dealing with that. So I think that, like what you're talking about, like people feeling threatened, their culture feeling threatened by newcomers, I think the history has a lot to do with that too. If it's something that's just starting to happen,
Yeah.
it can be a lot more challenging. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's also another aspect that I think a lot of people are not considering is that when they think about the good old days, they're going back to like the 1950s, 1960s, somewhere in there, and they're thinking, oh, that's when America was great. That's, I think, where the whole Make America Great Again concept comes from, is like there was this time that, or at least for this group of people, they thought this was a great place. And they can kind of point to that and say, well, back in the day, we didn't have that. But also back in the day, we didn't have most adult women working either. So if you have 1,000 jobs and it's only men who are working, like, say, 800 of those jobs, well, that's one thing. But if you suddenly have 800 men and 800 women that want jobs, you either have to come up with 2,000 jobs or, everybody gets less money because there's just too many people that are there available to hire. So even if every immigrant were taken away tomorrow, you still don't have enough work to satisfy everybody that wants to work for the amount of money that they would like to make. Or you would, again, we're getting into anti-capitalism again, because you would if the owners didn't feel the need to take 70% of the profits and to just divvy up the bottom 30%. Okay, sorry. Yeah, all right, I'm talking too much. I should let you guys talk. It's just, I don't know, it's just funny how these arguments, they kind of leap around in a circle and you go, oh, okay.
Yes.
And then you figured it out. But
All roads lead to
All roads lead
Yeah.
to anti-capitalism.
well, it's sort of in a way. Yeah. Huh. Okay. We'll get off the anti-capitalism. Well, we don't have to, but it's just I think it's different from kind of what we're talking about in terms of, like, what do we do? So what you're actually studying, though, you both sent something that described what you were doing, which I really appreciate, and I thank you for that. That has more to do with, like, laws and things, right? That's what specifically you were looking at, the way laws and situations are affecting immigrants or something?
I was looking at ICE in the community,
Right.
and then Miriam.
I was looking a little bit at a smaller scale, just at how two of the departments on the U of I campus, urban planning and architecture, are responding to having more and more international students.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah, I thought there was a law kind of thing in there, but I guess I was looking at that a different way. So that's interesting, because the last two people I had here, one was studying how immigrants, how anti-immigrant groups were approaching the topic, what kind of rhetoric they were using, and the other one was looking at international students and how they used space.
Yes.
So is this like, are these kind of two general groups, like immigrants, international students? Is that, have you kind of divided into two separate things, or is it just chance?
There's chance.
It's just chance. Okay.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it's just Grant and I who were working on topics related to international students. So.
Okay. So how were you inspired to look in that direction?
Well, I guess, let's see. Starting the class, I decided it would be really interesting to look at how the university campus is changing, because it's definitely been a theme I've been hearing a lot, especially in our department, which is urban planning. I guess just in general, students and faculty members have been mentioning that the incoming class this year is the most international class on record, with over half of the students coming from outside the U.S.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, especially with some of the conversations we were having in class, I just started to think about how would a university department try to become welcoming to international students when you have more and more international students. And so I was just drawn to the topic because it's in a way very personal. Like, I'm looking at a department where I am every day, and I was talking to students, many of whom are close friends, about their experiences in the department. So it's been a very interesting project.
So I'm trying to think quickly, like what problems can I imagine international students? So language is obviously one.
Yeah, language is obvious, of course, and that, came up quite a bit. But there are plenty of other things that I guess, it was something that was interesting to me is when I was having interviews with both faculty members and students, people would talk about really different kinds of issues. So it was even, at times it was hard to think about what are the major themes that are coming out, because people were pointing out so many different things. And so one of the major areas I did focus on was, are there changes in the curriculum? For example, are professors trying to bring in more international material, or to make space in a curriculum that's really largely centered on the U.S. to try to bring in some kind of comparative perspective so that students who are coming from outside of the U.S. can participate more fully in that conversation. It's also interesting, too, to look at classroom dynamics. This was something that students brought up a lot, as just many are coming from places where the culture of a university classroom is really different, so students are less likely to be expected to participate or even to have attendance counted as part of the grade. And so students have had to adjust to just different expectations in the classroom. And I mean, faculty respond to this kind of discomfort at first in very different ways. And so yeah, just like I said, all kinds of different things were coming up that I probably wouldn't have thought of on my own.
Now, on these kinds of classes, I've never been to one of them, so I'm not that familiar with it. Do they teach you, basically, at the beginning of the year, they say, okay, here's this set of stuff, and by the end of the year, you're going to know all this stuff? Or is it more like, here's some ideas that we're going to explore, and we're going to, by the end, we're going to assess how well what you've made out of these interesting ideas?
I mean, in a lot of ways it depends on the class, but I think in general it's much closer to the second project.
Really? Okay.
And this came up a lot with architecture professors too, who talked about how a lot of students weren't used to the expectations that they develop their own projects. They're more used to having a professor hand them, okay, this is the project you're going to be working on this semester, instead of having to take ownership of an individual idea. But in urban planning too, I think in a lot of our classes, depending on whatever the final project is, we learn how to come up with our own more creative ideas and sort of pursue topics that are individually interesting to us, and we sort of build the tools to explore these topics throughout the semester.
So it's not so much like...
Yeah, I would agree, yeah.
Like your professor says, here's a bunch of questions, and we'll see if you can come up with the right answer, which I will tell you whether you're right or wrong. It's more like, tell me here are questions.
What have you learned? Yeah.
Tell me what your answers are, and then we'll explore how successful you've been at dealing with them. I
think it's much closer to the latter, yes.
Now, see, that makes more sense to me. But then again, I am in America, and I am, I am a product of that system. So, to me, that seems like creative thinking. That it's like you want to teach someone how to solve problems and think creatively.